Internasional Indonesia adalah graduate school, Universitas Islam bertaraf internasional, menjadi pusat pengkajian kebudayaan Islam yang modern, toleran, dan berkemajuan.
Secara fisik, kampus ini didesain sebagai kampus yang ikonik, yang futuristik, dan diharapkan inilah salah satu model kampus dengan arsitektur tropikal. Kita harapkan bahwa para mahasiswa Sivitas Akademika itu nantinya menikmati suasana kampus yang hijau, yang berbuah, kemudian mereka juga bisa olahraga pagi, sore, naik sepeda dari asrama ke fakultas, ke library, ke masjid. Kampus ini kita harapkan betul-betul sebagai satu center for the epistemic community, pusat dari masyarakat ilmiah. Mereka ke sini betul-betul fokus untuk studi. Di samping Indonesia sebagai laboratorium yang hidup, pengalaman kita berdemokrasi, pengalaman bagaimana mendirikan republik ini, dan ini bukan Islamic State, kita juga menjaga kebinekaan. Hal-hal seperti ini kan unik sekali. Nah, bagaimana ini bisa kita kemas dalam satu format akademik dan budaya, kemudian menjadi semacam konsumsi intelektual bagi masyarakat intelektual Indonesia dan juga bagi masyarakat luar yang datang ke sini. Karena sebuah universitas itu mesti ada, yaitu program humaniora, ilmu sosial, sains, di samping juga studi keagamaan. Dengan adanya beberapa tenaga ahli dari dalam luar negeri, mereka itu tidak saja memberi kuliah bagi mahasiswa di dalam kelas, tapi kita harapkan mereka juga bisa diambil manfaatnya dan memberi manfaat pada komunitas di luar kampus ini. Dengan demikian, kampus ini tidak saja dimiliki oleh masyarakat Indonesia, kita harapkan kampus ini dimiliki juga oleh dunia Islam. Keislaman yang berkembang dan yang kita kembangkan itu keislaman yang terkoneksi, terbuka, berdialog dengan ilmu-ilmu yang lain. Sekarang bagaimana kampus ini juga menyambung perkembangan sejarah yang agak terputus, satu bangunan ilmu yang sudah terpisahkan, yang sudah terdistorsi, yang termiskinkan. Kampus Islam itu tidak hanya Islamic Studies sungguhnya, tapi juga mencakup berbagai ilmu-ilmu yang lain.
Dari Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia akan lahir intelektual yang memahami persoalan kehidupan global, menghadirkan solusi yang efektif dan bermanfaat untuk semesta. Rahmatan lil alamin.
from Directorate Building of UIII, Second International Conference Muslim World Economy and Business, our Master of Ceremony, Yani Kurnia.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please kindly have your seat since the Second International Conference of Muslim World Economic and Business, Muslim World Resilience in Anticipating the Global Economic Uncertainties will start in a few minutes. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Minister of Finance Republic of Indonesia and also Member Board of Trustee of UIII, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati. Rektor of Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia, Profesor Komarudin Hidayat. Vice Rector for Academics, Human Resources, and Student Affairs, Bahrul Hayat, PhD. Vice Rector for Research, Cooperation, and Community Engagement, Profesor Jamhari. Vice Rector for Planning, Finance, and Business Development, Dadang Mulyawan, PhD. University Secretariat, Dr. Kaider S. Bamualim. Dean of Faculty of Education, Profesor Nina Nurmila. Director of Business Development, Profesor Amsal Bahtiar. Director of Library and Culture, Dr. Pil Syafiq Hashim. The Executive Board Member of UIII, and our speakers, Professor S.C. Johnson College of Business, Cornell University, Professor Iwan Jaya Aziz. Professor of Finance and Financial Econometrics, Trobe University, Professor M. Ishaq Bhatti. Deputy Minister for Economic Affairs, Ministry of National Development Planning Republik of Indonesia, Bapenas, Ibu Amalia Adininggar Widya Astuti. Founder Rumah Mocaf Indonesia, Bapak Riza, Azyumarridha, Azra, and all distinguished guests. Welcome to the Second International Conference of Muslim World Economic and Business, Muslim World Resilience in Anticipating the Global Economic Uncertainties. I'm Yani Kurnia, and on behalf of the Faculty of Economics and Business and UIII organizing committees, I would like to extend our highest appreciation for your attendance and participation. And we hope that this second international conference gives us good insight into better development in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, to commence this event, please rise for the national anthem of Indonesia, Lagu Indonesia Raya, following by the university hymn, Hymn Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia. Please return to your seat. We would like to invite Professor Komarudin Hidayat to deliver his welcoming remark. Professor, the podium is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa syukurillah wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyina Muhammad Rasulullah amma ba'du. Honorable Minister, distinguished guests and esteemed colleagues, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to the second International Conference Muslim World Economy and Business and call for papers. I would like to express my gratitude to all of you for taking the time to attend this important event. We are honored to have with us today the Minister of Finance of Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, as well as our distinguished speakers, Professor Iwan Jaya Aziz from Cornell University, and Professor Ishaq Bhatti from Trobe University, and many more. The expertise and insight on finance and financial econometrics will undoubtedly enrich our discussion. Well, actually, the position of Minister Sri Mulyani is very instrumental, and she has very specific position in this university. Without her support and endorsement, I think we'll not see this campus and attend here. So thank you, Sri Mulyani, for your full support. The theme of this year's conference, that is Muslim World Resilience in Anticipating the Global Economic Uncertainties, is particularly relevant in today's world, where economic uncertainties have become increasingly common. The Muslim world, like other regions, is not immune to these turbulences, and we must work together to address them. As we may be aware, the global economic uncertainties 2023 are a complex and multifaceted challenge that affect countries, business, and individuals around the world. These uncertainties arise from a combination of several factors, including political instability, trade tensions, climate change, and technological disruption. As a result, businesses and investors are faced with a high degree of unpredictability, which can lead to volatility in financial market and hinder economic growth. To overcome these turbulences and uncertainties, it is crucial to develop resilience and adaptability to change. This requires strategic planning, innovative thinking, and collaboration among stakeholders. The discussion and insight shared at the second International Conference Muslim World today will contribute to a better understanding of these uncertainties and identify solutions to address them. Over the next 2 days, we will have the opportunity to engage in robust discussion and exchange ideas on various topics related to the theme, including Islamic finance, entrepreneurship, and innovation. I am confident that the presentation and discussion will contribute significantly to our understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing the Muslim world in the current economic climate. Lastly, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our partners and the organizing committee for their hard work and dedication in making this event possible. Once again, I welcome you all to the second International Conference Muslim World Economy and Business and call for papers. And I hope that you will find the conference insightful, productive, and enjoyable. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor. Now, let us immerse ourselves in prayer, led by Abu Bakar, PhD candidate in Faculty of Economic and Business. Abu Bakar, podium is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala خير الأنام سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وآله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. يا رب إننا نبدأ هذا المؤتمر العلمي بذكرك واستغفارك ونسألك الإخلاص في النية والتوفيق في العمل ونرجو منك أن تجعله مبارا للتبادل العلم والتعلم المتبادلة ومنصة لنشر الخير وخدمة المستمع. رب اجعل هذا المؤتمر فرصة للتعاون بين العلماء والباحثين ولتبادل الخبرات والمعارف والإثراء العلوم والمعارف بما ينفع الإنسانية وينفع به الإسلام والمسلمين. رب نسألك أن تبارك لنا في هذا المؤتمر وتعيننا على استثمار الوقت والجهد فيما يرضيك وينفع الناس وأن تجعل هذا المؤتمر بداية لرحلة طويلة من العلم والإنتاج والتطور وتسخر لنا فيه قوة العقل والإيمان وتجعله نافذة مشركة نبيئا به دروب العلم والمعرف ومنهج ينحل منه الباحثون والمثقفون لتحقيق رؤية الازدهار في جميع الميدان. Okay. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, prayers and peace be upon the base of God's creation, our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May God's prayer and peace be upon him, his family, his companions, and those who follow him in goodness until the day of judgment. O Allah, we start this scientific conference by remembering you and asking you for forgiveness. And we ask you sincerity in intention and success in work. And we pray that you make it a platform for scientific exchange and mutual learning, and a platform for spreading goodness and community service. O Allah, make this conference an opportunity for cooperation among scholars and researchers, for exchanging experience and knowledge, and for enriching science and knowledge for the benefit of humanity, Islam, and Muslims. May Lord bless us in this conference. Guide us to what pleases you and benefit people. We implore you to make this conference the beginning of a long journey to scholarship and development. Empower us to harness the power of reason and faith from it, and make it a bright window for illuminating the path of knowledge and a gateway for researchers and intellectuals to realize prosperity in all human endeavor. May Allah bless our teachers, our lecturers, may Allah bless our faculty, may Allah bless all the students in this university, and may Allah make this university to be one of the best universities in the world. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Amin ya Rabbal Alamin. Thank you, Abu Bakar. We can now begin the second international conference on Muslim world economic and business, Muslim world resilience in anticipating the global economy uncertainties with our keynote speaker, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati. She will discuss with us about fiscal strategies in facing the global economic downturn via virtual media. This discussion will lead by Ibu Dian Masyita. Ibu Dian Masyita is a professor of Islamic Finance and Banking. Currently, she is a Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, Indonesian International Islamic University. She graduated her PhD in Islamic Finance from Durham University, UK in 2012. She finished her master's degree in 2001 from Institute of Technology Bandung and her postgrad of finance in 2007 from Maastricht School of Management, Netherlands. Now she also is head of Zakat and Wakaf Division, Ikatan Ahli Ekonomi Islam. Please welcome Ibu Dian Masyita as the moderator to chair this session. Ibu Dian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, MC. Honorable Finance Minister, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Honorable Rector of UIII, Professor Komarudin Hidayat, Vice Rector, the Secretary, the Dean of UIII, distinguished speaker, guests and participants, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. First of all, I would like to welcome you all to our second international conference. And before the Finance Minister begin her presentations, please allow me to share her short journey as the Finance Minister. Of course, Ibu Sri Mulyani needs no introduction, but learning from her journey, from her short bio, it can be the inspiration for young generation, especially young women in this building. Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, born in Bandar Lampung on August 26, 1962, she earned her bachelor degree in economics from University of Indonesia in 1986. Then she continued her study in the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, United States for Master of Science and Policy Economics in 1990. And in 1992, she earned PhD in economics from the same university. She was chosen to be the Executive Director of International Monetary Fund, IMF, representing 12 countries in the Southeast Asia at the beginning of October 2002. And December 5, 2005, she was appointed to serve the Minister of Finance of Republic Indonesia. On September 18, 2006, Sri Mulyani was crowned as the best Minister of Finance in Asia by the emerging market in the sidelines of World Bank and IMF annual session in Singapore. She was also elected as the 23rd World's Most Influencing Woman from Forbes magazine in 2008 and the second most influencing woman in Indonesia from Globe Asia magazine in October 2007. Sri Mulyani was also awarded as the Best Minister of Finance for 2006 from the Euro Money and the Best Minister of Finance in Asia by the Emerging Market Forum on the same year. In 2008, she served as the acting coordinating minister for economic affairs. Then she was appointed as the executive director of the World Bank commencing on June 1st, 2010. And on July 27, 2016, President Joko Widodo inaugurated Sri Mulyani Indrawati as the Minister of Finance in his working cabinet. And February 11, 2018, the World Government Summit has announced her as the best minister in the world. For many more about Ibu Sri Mulyani, you can find easily from website, and also you can googling her. Okay. How about, is it okay? So Ibu Sri Mulyani already, okay, thank you. Bu Sri Mulyani, the stage is yours. Assalamualaikum Ibu Sri Mulyani. Okay, maybe we are waiting for a while. Okay, maybe for 1-2 minutes waiting for her readiness. I want to give some information, especially for our call for papers. Alhamdulillah, we accepted around 69 papers from 24 different countries, including UK, Turkey, Bulgaria, Ukraine, Australia, South Korea, Malaysia, Brunei, and many more. We hope for the last week we review all the papers, and we hope the authors who have submitted their work and will present the paper tomorrow. So we hope all the students and also the participants can follow our call for papers tomorrow morning. And we have selected 20 papers to be presented, and we will try to find the best paper, the 3 best paper for this year. How about how many minutes we have to wait? Okay. Assalamualaikum Bu Ani.
Waalaikumsalam Mas Riza. Udah bisa dengar suara saya?
Sudah Ibu, we are waiting for you.
Okay.
Now I move to a stage. The stage is yours, Bu Ani.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Distinguished participants, good morning. I would like to first express my regret not being able to attend in presence physically in the campus due to very tight back-to-back schedule that I have to attend. So I would like to thank to the committee for the opportunity to deliver a remark for this second international conference on Muslim world economy and business, or ICMWEB 2023. Given the persistent downside risks that loom over the global economy landscape, I believe the topic of the fiscal strategy for harnessing global economic downturn is very timely and relevant. I will start my presentation by overviewing the global economic situation, which is very challenging, even as we are speaking today. Then I will present the Indonesian economic situation, progress, especially after the very hard-hit pandemic globally, and especially the fiscal performance. Finally, I will also talk about the reform agenda which the government of Indonesia is conducted as a new engine of growth. Ladies and gentlemen, currently we are facing the post-pandemic situation. On the one hand, the pandemic of COVID has significantly decreased, and recently WHO has declared that the end of the COVID global health emergency is here. In Indonesia, we had lifted our social restriction policy that we are expecting to support the recovery of the economy even stronger. Unfortunately, when the risk from this pandemic has been receded, the global economy landscape presenting a multitude of challenges and threatening the global economic recovery. First, due to the war in Ukraine and geopolitical tension has created a huge pressure on the commodity, and that's creating global uncertainty. Geo-economic fragmentation is becoming even deeper and widened. As a result, the inflation in many advanced countries has increased, or even in emerging countries. We also seeing some countries, especially a big country like United States, has adopted the Inflation Reduction Act, and in Europe, carbon border adjustment policy. This will definitely creating additional pressure to many countries who's exporting to those countries, as well as investment flow. With this kind of risk, which is escalating and responded by the increasing interest rate in many advanced countries in such a very fast and very extreme high comparing to the past 1.5 decades, the IMF has already projected from the World Economic Report that the global economy will slow down quite significantly to only 2.8% growth this year, comparing to last year 3.4%. And for next year, will be expected slightly to improve at the level of 3%. On the other hand, the global economy will continue to stay high. At the level of global, it will be projected at around 7%. This is a record-breaking comparing to the past decade and a half in which inflation was actually almost close to zero. For several European economies, the high inflation rate, which is then responded by increasing interest rate, it will also weaken the economic recovery. On the other hand, Chinese economic openness is going to slightly improve the global projection. Now, I would like to talk about the domestic Indonesia economic situation. Despite the very challenging environment at the global level, the Indonesia economy is performing relatively well, or even close to excellent. If you look at the Indonesia, our size of market, we are the fourth most populous country in the world, And we are among the 10 largest economy with the fastest e-commerce sector growth after Vietnam. We also have the population which rising middle income class becoming one of the very robust engine of growth. Our successful handling of COVID providing us not only the confidence, but also the acceleration momentum of recovery. The recovery has been robust in which Indonesia recorded 6 quarters in a row with the growth above 5%. Last year, the whole year growth is 5.3, and the first quarter of this year, we are at 5.03. This is really remarkable given that the global economy is actually facing with a very significant weakening. At the same time, we also carefully manage our tool, and that's why on the fiscal side, rating agencies like Fitch, Standard & Poor, and Moody, they are providing assessment of risk in Indonesia at the level of BBB stable rating across these 3 rating agencies. These are very rare situations given many countries, actually their trend is worsening. Growth weaken, inflation is very high, debt increase, and their deficit continue very widen. Not to mention, of course, in the United States today, we are all following the news that they are now negotiating the debt cap in which going to affect the ability to repay their deficit. So these are the very successful Indonesia in managing first the global economic uncertainty and also fragmentation. But on the other hand, also handling from the COVID to the coordinated, concerted effort to recover economy in such a very effective way. And the result is, of course, the growth momentum continues strong, inflation has been reduced without excessively using the interest rate by central bank to tame the inflation. On the production side, we also see that PMI, Purchasing Manager Index, on the manufacturing, it's also even stronger from 51.9 in March, which is already expanded, to 52.7% at 52.7 in April, which is showing that the manufacturing sector activity continued to be very strong. The domestic side, if you can see from the aggregate demand, household consumption has recovered 4.9% growth, which is explaining 51.9% of our GDP. Investment is also starting to recover, and our export contributing a very significant economic growth. Now I would like to look at the fiscal policy. This is the most important instrument in managing even during a very difficult and challenging pandemic, as well as to maintain the recovery momentum. Fiscal policy, that is our budget, has actually played a very effective and flexible role in managing the downturn during the deficit, during the pandemic, in which the economy weakened or even near to collapse when all activity has been halted due to the pandemic. For those extreme situations, Indonesia adopted emergency law, which is allowing deficit to widen more than 3% of GDP in one fiscal year. This is unprecedented because since 20 years ago, Indonesia has adopted a very disciplined fiscal rule. Any fiscal year should not recording deficit above 3% of GDP. And our debt to GDP ratio should not exceed 60% of GDP. But because pandemic globally has weakening or paralyzing the economy, then fiscal tools becoming the most important and the most reliable counter-cyclical to counter the collapsing economy. With that situation, Indonesia adopting emergency law, that is law number 1 2020 or emergency law number 1 2020, and then adopted by the parliament to become law number 2 2020, which allowing Indonesia to open the cap of deficit. So we designed the fiscal during the most difficult, that is the first year of pandemic in 2020, by allowing deficit above 3%. We end up with the deficit of 6.1% of GDP. Of course, this will expose our debt increase within only 1 year. In 2021, because the pandemic, especially the Delta variant, continue hitting hard the economy, we still have the deficit of the budget above 3%, that is designing at 5.5, but we end up with the fiscal deficit only at 4.6. What is the message of this graph? First, although we designed the deficit much larger, we also carefully manage our spending as well as starting to collect revenue again when the economy is starting to recover, especially on the second half of 2021. During this difficult time, Indonesia also continue adopting the reform that will providing a stronger foundation for us to recover and restoring the fiscal health. So we discussed with the parliament and adopting the tax reform on the, what we call it, harmonizing tax reform, and also intergovernmental fiscal transfer. We also adopting the omnibus law, job creation law. This is to fundamentally change the way the Indonesia conduct the investment policy, which is simplifying regulation on the investment and boosting the ability of especially small, medium enterprises to be able to do their business and expand their business. We also able to discuss with the parliament financial sector development reform. This is the first very important reform which actually managing and arranging all the institutions, making sure the stability of the financial sector. That means Bank Indonesia, Central Bank, OJK, that is Financial Sector Authority, LPS, that is Indonesia Deposit Insurance Corporation, and Ministry of Finance, as the four authority which is making sure stability of the financial sector. Within this financial sector reform, we also strengthening the area of Sharia financial sector, and we introduce regulation, making sure that the digital financial technology will be also integrated, being used to accelerate the financial inclusion, but at the same time protecting the people or the consumer. These are all the reform we just designed, discussed with the parliament, and approved even during the pandemic. So I would like to back to the fiscal policy. After 2021, starting recovery on the second half, in 2022, we continue accelerating the recovery and consolidating our fiscal. Back to the previous slide sebelumnya. We see that the fiscal is actually declining before that, very fast into less than 3%, in which we actually able to deliver our fiscal discipline, in which the deficit declined below 3% of GDP. As I said earlier, can you put the deficit of the fiscal, the previous slide, please? In which the fiscal deficit allowing to be 3% of GDP, which is being opened by this emergency law. But we open this deficit allowing for exceeding 3% of GDP only in 3 years. Meaning, because of the extraordinary situation due to the pandemic, we were allowed to have deficit above 3% of GDP, but this is only for 3 years. After that, Indonesia will have to adopt the fiscal prudent policy, in which in fiscal year, every year, we cannot exceed the deficit by 3%. So as you can see here, in 2022, even at the third year, which is only after 2 years exceeding 3% of deficit, we were able to reduce the deficit and return to the deficit below 3%. That is, in 2022, originally we designed the deficit at 4.9. We end up with a deficit of only 2.4%. So this is all the good result of first combination of the responsiveness of our fiscal policy in time of crisis like pandemic, but at the same time, Indonesia also has already from the very beginning planning to return to the deficit of our fiscal policy when the economic starting to recover. This is maybe for many of you who's majoring in economics and following the current development globally, is actually a remarkable situation. As I said earlier, in the United States, fiscal deficit and debt limit becoming a political crisis. Their situation of the recovery also creating a banking problem in the United States. In Europe, you also see that this dilemma between consolidating fiscal with the momentum of recovery, which is already weakened by the interest rate increase because of the inflation. So for this, Indonesia is maybe among the country within the G20 as well as in ASEAN, which is performing very well in the growth, which is recover continuously and stable, strong, while the fiscal tools now also starting to getting healthier and consolidated. Now, if you look at our budget 2022, it is actually the last year of our budget under the emergency pandemic situation. As you can see, in 2022, our revenue grows by 30.6%. The tax is actually also growing by 31.4%. This is a very strong recovery on the fiscal side. Even in 2021, that is the first year after pandemic, we actually starting to recover and collect revenue in such a very impressive way. The revenue growing by 22% and the tax collection improved by 20%. On the other hand, if you look at our government spending, we certainly have an increase in spending because of the pandemic and supporting the recovery. But our spending growth is actually managed relatively in a disciplined way, so that the spending is only growing by 10.9% in 2022, and the previous year in 2021 only increased by 7.4%. So that if you look at our deficit of the budget in 2022, in 2020, when the first pandemic hit Indonesia and the world, our deficit widened very significantly from 2019 348 trillion rupiah and almost tripled to 947 in 2020. That is when we allow to have deficit above 3%. Now, with this kind of situation, we have to be able to manage the two very difficult tasks. How we are going to make sure that the pandemic can be handled without constraint on the budget, and the recovery of the economy can be supported, while on the other hand, we are making sure that the fiscal, that is our budget, will not continue deteriorating in terms of their situation. So this is the most difficult and important task during 2020 to 2022. The past 3 years providing us with a very important lesson, a combination of very challenging tasks of managing the economy to be recovered, addressing the issue of pandemic, which is threatening the life of the people, and at the same time, we need to restore and return to the fiscal prudence. Of course, Indonesia revenue collection, which is recovered very strongly in the past 2 years, contributed by first the recovery of the economy, but we also designing and implementing tax reform and starting to collect more because of the commodity. So we have these three very important steps. That is the recovery economy providing us with more collection of revenue. The second one, the tax reform that we adopted, especially in a digital transaction, VAT, and also increasing one additional bracket on a personal income tax for the most richest people in Indonesia. And at the same time, we provide affirmation for the small medium enterprise by lowering their tax rate. So it's a combination between affirmative policy for the small taxpayer, especially small medium enterprises, and increasing progressivity by increasing tax rate on the highest income bracket. And you can really see that the recovery is also contributed not only by the commodity price, but also by many other sectors, including manufacturing, and then trade, and even financial sector. The deepest sector which is affected by the pandemic, like transportation, also starting to recover in a very robust way. So these are all showing that our policy is already also providing room for the recovery in the business sector, and also at the same time, we continue maintaining the discipline of the Indonesia economy. So after the shock and returning to the stability and recovery, Indonesia is now focusing on how we are going to strengthen our fundamental. As I mentioned earlier, that even during very difficult time of pandemic, Indonesia continue adopting a very ambitious reform. The tax harmonizing law, the fiscal relation with local government, as well as the financial sector reform are the most important reform that we are adopted within the Ministry of Finance. But in general economy, we also adopting the reform on the job creation omnibus law. After those legislation reform, Indonesia also continue reforming to address the issue of the fundamental of the economy, that is productivity and creating more value added. Indonesia is a country with very rich natural resources, but in the past, never actually able to create more value added from these natural resources. And that's why currently the government, by also taking advantage of the momentum of the global economy, shifting the automotive industry into more electric vehicle, Indonesia positioning ourselves in a very strong way because we have the natural resources. We also improve our investment climate, and we also providing additional incentive so that the industry related to the electric vehicle and the battery ecosystem can be developed consistently and robustly. This is the strategy of industrialization in revitalizing our manufacturing sector and creating more value added in the domestic economy. The second one is, of course, we have to make sure that the investment can become the engine of growth. While we've already passing the omnibus law on the job creation, one of the most important in supporting investment is the quality of human capital. That's why our allocation budget for education and training is the largest and mandated by our constitution. 20% of our spending should be dedicated for education and training. But we also making sure that the health spending will be equally important, because the quality of the human capital will depend on education, skill, and also their health. And of course, Indonesia designing the social safety net in order to make sure that the human capital will have the government safety net in place, especially to support the poorest. And then we also improve our infrastructure. There is no investment will come and invest in Indonesia if the infrastructure becoming a problem, in a bad quality. That's why our support for infrastructure building, from road, toll road, port, airport, and especially electricity and clean water becoming so significant. And that's not only boosting the economy through our budget, but also improving the investment performance in Indonesia. We also established what we call it the endowment fund for education. As you are all now studying in the University Islam International here in Depok, all the campus and all the conducting of the activity of education is being supported fully by our budget. This is also by part of our policy that the education in Indonesia should becoming better quality and offering the opportunity for many other people all over the world to learn and study in Indonesia. Another thing very important, education policy is supporting research and development. So massive endowment fund in education is one of the most important fiscal policy. As you can see, although we are becoming very disciplined in managing our budget, it doesn't mean that Indonesia cutting the spending across the board. We are very selective and disciplined, but we also providing a very significant support for the human capital education, infrastructure development, as well as improving the performance of bureaucracy. Of course, the last part is on the financial sector reform that I mentioned earlier, because any country who want to continue building and developing the economy can only be done if they have a deepening and a more advanced financial sector and financial industries. And this is the area in which our reform on the financial sector, especially first, integrating and adopting fintechs, that is digital technology within financial sector, but also at the same time providing continuous affirmation policy for the small medium enterprises, and at the same time protecting the people and the consumer, especially on the data. So these are all the reform that the Indonesia is adopting even during the very challenging situation due to the pandemic as well as global political tension. Any problem should not an excuse for us not to do best and doing the most difficult reform. I think within this case, the message for all of us is that we should not finding always an excuse to do the hardest part of making a better life for the people. I do hope that this presentation will provide you with at least first understanding of the Indonesia economic situation, the way we manage through our fiscal policy, and especially commitment of Indonesia to continue improve the human capital, quality, infrastructure, and the economic performance. This is to create a welfare and prosperity for the people in a just way. Thank you so much, and I do hope you are going to have a fruitful discussion during this seminar. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much. It's very insightful and important information about our economy, Bu Menteri. Do you have any time to Q&A session or?
Yeah, I still have 10 minutes before I have to attend another event at 10.
Yes, okay. Maybe next time or 10 minutes only?
Yeah, 10 minutes. If
Okay.
there is any important question.
We have how many? Okay, one. Okay, please, if you tell your name and also your affiliation. Please.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Surya from UIN Sumatera Utara. Thanks, Bu Sri. I actually emailed you several times at your official address. So it's a very good policy that you started with the Pemulihan Ekonomi Nasional, yeah. And I was very happy, which is why I mailed you, that you were in the Women's Forum organized by the United Nations, I think 2 years back. Stephanie Calton, Mariana Mazzucato, and then you. So do you think that the Pemulihan Ekonomi Nasional could be continued to 2024 and 2025 in terms of the relaxation of the rules, the Maastricht criteria, 3% and 60%? Because as we know, Prof. Calton has proven in her book, The Deficit Myth, that deficit is actually a myth. So that's my question. Do you think that the relaxation can be continued to 2024 or 2025? Thank you very much.
I think it's only one question, Bu Menteri.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Is there any other question, Bu Masita?
You still have? Okay, one.
Yes, I have a question for the Honorable Minister.
You can stand up, please.
Thank you. My name is Mohamed Salih Jallo from the Gambia, a student of Economics and Business, UIII. Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for the presentation. It's very insightful, and the analysis we have learned a lot as students. Yes, the question I have for you, like you say at the peak of the pandemic, the ministry, under your ministry, you design a policy that is to increase the deficit to 6%. And then the reason why you said that is to make sure that you recover the economy. But after that, you mentioned like the way you try to bridge the gap, that is to close the gap of the deficit, is to increase the revenue. And that you do by increasing the tax. Why tax was the main issue? That's the question I have. Why didn't you go into other issues in case of focusing on tax? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have two questions here, Bu Menteri.
Okay. Thank you so much for the question. The first question from the UIN Sumatera Utara. The question is actually about the Maastricht Law. Maastricht Law is actually the law, the fiscal policy or fiscal prudent law, which is only allowing the country in European, in this case, to only allow to have deficit less than 3% of GDP in each fiscal year, and the total deficit should not, total debt in this case, should not exceeding 60% of GDP. Indonesia is actually adopting this law since 2004. Now, your question is whether this Maastricht law is going to be adopted or will be relaxed. I'm not sure about the question, but maybe what you are asking is that in 2024, 2025, are we going to continue adopting this fiscal prudent law? Actually, Indonesia is already returning to the Maastricht law in 2022. So originally when we were hit hard by the pandemic, and that's collapsing the whole economy all over the world, not only Indonesia, as you can see from the graph earlier, that Indonesia even also suffering the deficit, the collapsing of the economy by more than 5%. Now, in many other countries, the contraction of the economy is even deeper, could be even more than 10%. So Indonesia in this case relatively very manageable at the minus 5.3%. On the other hand, the recovery is also very fast. Within the following year, we were able to grow by 3.7%. Even on the second quarter, we were growing by 7.1% in 2021. Now, with those recovery, we are using this momentum of recovery to also restoring the health of our fiscal situation. So in 2021, as I mentioned earlier, our deficit is actually, we're able to be declined from 6.1% in 2020 to become only 4.6%. That means we reduce more than 1.5% of GDP deficit within 1 year. This is a very big consolidation. If you can compare with many other countries in the world, 2021, most countries is still in a very deep deficit, even though they already recovered their economy. And if you also observe in 2022, originally we think that the deficit is going to be more than 3%, that is violating the Maastricht law. And that's why our deficit was designed at 4.9%. because we were thinking that the recovery of the economy is still very weak and very fragile, very early. So we should support and managing carefully this recovery process. What happened in 2022, the recovery is continued strong, and that's why the whole growth was 5.3% of growth on the GDP. This is still continued strong, stable recovery. And with that growth, and of course with the commodity price, we were able to decline the deficit only to 2.4% of GDP. From originally, we think that it will be close to 5%. So you can imagine within 1 year, Indonesia declining again the deficit by 2.5%. So if you look at the whole 2 year, 2021 and 2022, the fiscal consolidation is actually 3% of GDP. Maybe Bapak need to look at many other countries. Many other countries is very difficult to consolidate the fiscal at the magnitude of 3% of GDP only less than 2 years. Because if that's happened, usually many countries will have the situation in which the economy is going to be disrupted by reducing the deficit up to the 3% of GDP within 2 years. If you compare, for example, Bapak maybe will see the best performance of G20 at this moment is India and Indonesia, because the growth rate is the most highest in the G20. But if you look at the fiscal deficit and debt to GDP ratio, Indonesia is in a much better situation. Our consolidation is much stronger and much shorter. That is, in a very short time, we decline the deficit in such a very quick and fast, while other countries usually is actually doing it in a very gradual way. So what I'm saying, the Maastricht law is actually showing the commitment of the fiscal deficit. Whether this is a myth or not, is actually depend on the country. If you can see, European is the region which is adopting this Maastricht law first, but in the past decade, all countries is already abandoning this law. They're no longer following this fiscal discipline. What is the result? For example, a country like Italy, their deficit is very high, and their debt to GDP ratio also above 100%. Portugal, even if you look France or Germany, which is actually the most prudent, maybe in a European country, the two most prudent fiscally is Germany and Netherlands. But even them, actually they have still the exposure of the deficit and debt is actually very high. So this is just to show that Indonesia trying to do what we call it a good policy, which is still suit and fit with the Indonesia economic situation. So my colleague, the student from Gambia, welcome, and I do hope that you are studying in Indonesia in the most fruitful and productive way. And I do hope you can also learn a lot from the UIII. You are asking about whether the fiscal consolidation mainly contributed from the tax increase or increasing tax. There are two things if you look at our fiscal side. First, the revenue increase, which is very dramatic in the past 2 years, that is 2021 and 2022, and still continue until today, that is until April 2023. First, it is not because of the tax increase. It is more of the recovery of the economy, so that the activity of the economy has been restored and recovered, and that contributes a lot of the revenue. Another thing is we also ended many of the fiscal stimulus that is allowing for the tax suspension during the pandemic. when the economy is strong enough, those policy now being ended because we know that the economic activity has recovered, and that's why they were able to book profit and can pay tax. So these are all the two sources, that is the recovery of economy and the fiscal incentive by suspension or reducing of the tax has been ended when the economy is strong enough. The third thing, we also trying to look at the area which is the most important and creating profitable, that is mining sector. Indonesia is a natural resource rich. We have coal, we have nickel, we have tin, we have gold, and we also have the CPO, that is palm oil, which during 2022, because of the Ukraine war, the price of many commodity, including CPO, increased, and that provides us with the additional revenue. So you can see that without increasing rate, we collect more. The only rate that we increase is the VAT, value added tax. We increased slightly from 10% to 11% last year. And that's also contribute to some of this additional revenue. So you can see the improving revenue is because first, economic recovery, the termination of the incentive, 1% additional increasing rate of the VAT, and the last one is we start imposing and collecting tax on the digital technology. That is very important because Indonesia has been transformed many of the activity to the marketplace and a digital technology, and we are able to start to collect from that. So with that revenue increase, actually our fiscal and tax can actually even providing an affirmation policy to the small medium enterprises. As I said earlier, for the SMEs, their tax is actually reduced into only 0.5%. So it's very, very low. And we even increase what we call it the non-taxable income. So for the very small medium enterprise, when their income is not exceeding this non-taxable income, they don't pay tax. So this is what we call it a just policy. In Indonesia, we call it keadilan. That is, you provide support for the weakest, the small medium enterprises, and you tax those which is strong and generating excessive profit because of the commodity boom and the recovery of the economy. So I hope this will explain you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bu Ani. We really hope you can come to our university to choose and to meet the eager student who meet you. So thank you very much. Maybe you can continue your duty to others.
Thank you, Bu Masita. I apologize next time, maybe because of now the normal schedule to travel to Depok and then going back to the Jakarta for the back-to-back meeting is becoming very challenging. But I really want to be able to attend there, and I do hope all the students is going to have a very productive, good quality study in the UIII. Thank you so much and have a good productive seminar.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Bu Ani.
Yes, Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
What a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Ibu Sri Mulyani, and thank you, Ibu Dian. To Ibu Sri Mulyani, I hope you don't mind to stay on your screen for photo session. Yeah, just a little bit longer, Ibu. Okay, to all Executive Board of UIII and speakers, we would like to invite you to stand in front of the stage for photo session. And to IT team and media team, please help capture this moment. Thank you, Ibu Ani. To all our speakers too, Pak Fajar. Okay, on my count. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now let's facing to the screen to our all executive member and the speakers. Oh, because we want the audience on the frame too. Okay. Okay? Okay, on my count. 1, 2, 3. Okay. One more time. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's okay, it's okay. One more time. Oh, thank you, Ibu Ani, for your time. To all executive member and the speaker, please go back to your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, we can now begin with the first panel discussion, Global Economy and Geopolitics. This session will be led by Bapak Teguh Yudo Wicaksono. Bapak Yudo is a faculty member from Faculty of Economics and Business, UIII. Currently, he is the head of Mandiri Institute. He graduated with his PhD in Economics, University of Kentucky, Lexington, United States in 2015. He finished his master double degree in 2011 from University of Kentucky, United States, and in 2007 from University of Sydney, Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bapak Teguh Yudo Wicaksono as the moderator to chair this session. To Pak Yudo, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the kind introduction to MC. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very good morning, Executive Board of UIII. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. Let me introduce myself. My name is Teguh Yudo Wicaksono. It's my great pleasure to moderate the first panel of the second International Conference Muslim World Economy and Business with theme Muslim World Resilience in Anticipating the Global Economic Uncertainty. So before I invite our esteemed speakers, let me give a little bit about the context what we are going to discuss. So in this panel, we are going to discuss rather extensive but very related topics. So first, we are going to the outlook of the global economy and the geopolitical landscape in this year and also next year. And as you all might know that, since the Russia-Ukraine war, advanced economies have struggled with to contain inflation. Part of the original problem, I think, is the supply chain problem due to the COVID-19. But again, the global economy is getting worse due to this inflation and also the conflict, which result in rising energy, commodity, and food prices. So, as Bu Sri Mulyani also mentions, that because of this higher inflation, global policymakers respond to the situation by implementing steep hikes on the interest rate. And this decision is not without the complication as we see right now. High interest rates already trigger concerns about the potential economic downturn. Even advanced economies are predicted to enter a recession this year. And basically news are not so good these days. But of course there are some opportunities as well. This is what we are going to discuss, particularly even though about this recent discussion on the supply chain problems. I think we all agree that trade and globalization have been the key to our prosperity. That is what we have seen in the past decades, in which trade has been the key part of the economic development in developing countries. So in the second part, we are going to hear about the opportunities and challenges as well on trade and related issues among the Islamic countries group. And lastly, I think given the volatility and rapid changes in our economy, promoting inclusive growth and also innovation will be critical as well. So those topics that we are going to discuss today. So ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce our three esteemed speakers. Together with us, we have Professor Iwan Jaya Aziz from Cornell University. Please give a big applause to him. And also, please welcome Professor Bhatti from SP Jain School of Global Management. Very good morning, Professor Bhatti. And last not but least, let me invite Dr. Fajar Hirawan from our own faculty member. Thank you, gentlemen. So, first of all, I will give perhaps first opportunity to Prof. Iwan Jaya Aziz, and before I give time, let me briefly share about his profile. Prof. Aziz is a professor of emerging markets within the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management at Cornell University. He was also the director of graduate studies, regional science program at Cornell University, where he has taught since 1992. Prior to that, he was the chair of the Department of Economics and the director of the Inter-University Center of Economics at the University of Indonesia. He was also my professor when I did my bachelor degree. He was awarded Distinguished Scholar in Regional Science, Financial Economics and Economic Modeling in 2006, and a recipient of the 2022 Clifton Wharton Junior Emerging Market Award. His research focuses on the interlink between macro-financial economics, social institutions, and spatial inequalities in emerging markets. Besides academics, he is also actively engaged with policymakers at national and global level. He previously served as the appointed head of the Office of Regional Economic Integration at the Asian Development Bank or ADB, and he is also currently advising the Bank Indonesia, Indonesian Central Bank, and also Deposit Insurance Corporation, LPS, and a member of the International Advisory Panel of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So please once again give applause for Prof. Iwan, and time is yours, Prof. Please. Bisa di sana, Pak Iwan. Oh, bisa.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to thank UIII for inviting me, and also congratulations for the UIII. This is the first time for me to be in the campus, and it was impressive. Of course, because this is new, so I hope in the coming years UIII will continue to improve, not only in terms of the physical look as well as physical infrastructure, but more importantly for higher education institutions like UIII, it's the software, it's the content, it's the quality of the education that matters. So in that context, I would like to share a topic which is related to what Sri Mulyani mentioned earlier, except she talked about the Indonesian case, and I was asked by the UIII to talk about the global economic context. So let me spend a few minutes on this. I don't know how many minutes I have, but I hope the moderators will remind me if time is almost up, because the topic is so complex and it's difficult to decide where to enter, where to start. Okay? So I've been thinking maybe the best way and the shortest way to explain the landscape of the global economy is by looking at the evolution, how we arrive in what we are now, okay? Because everything that we are observing now, as Sri Mulyani correctly mentioned, it's very complex, it's very difficult, highly uncertain, but maybe we need to understand why we arrive at this point, okay? I didn't want to go too far away back, but let's start with the 1980s. I know many of you, maybe all of you were not born yet in 1980s, but something was very positive happening in the global economy in the 80s. For the lack of a better term, they call it great moderation. So this is the first G. If you look at the title of my presentation is 4+1G. So I started with the first G, and that is the great moderation. Long story short, the great moderation is featured by low inflation, low volatility of growth, as well as of inventories, and this is around the world, especially in advanced economies like the US, Europe, and so forth. So everybody was happy, especially macroeconomists. In fact, 2 Nobel Prize winners in economics at that time, I remember, said that because of the evidence of the 1980s, the search for new macroeconomics has ended. So macroeconomists no longer need to look for other approaches and so on, because everything was beautiful. But you know, everything that goes up will go down. And something happened, I would say, in the early 2000s. Major global event took place during the decade of 2000. The first one was not a good one, and that was in 2001. The biggest economy in the world, i.e. the United States, fell into recession. Now, I assume many of you studied economics, when you were in a recession, you tried everything you can trying to stimulate the economy. If you're talking about monetary policy, you try to lower the interest rate. If you talk about fiscal policies, like what Sri Mulyani was talking about, you try to expand the spending, cut the taxes and things like that. And that's exactly what happened in advanced economies. If you look at the trend of the interest rate in the US and in Europe, it's steadily going down. Why? Because they tried to stimulate the economy. It was in a recession. So that's the first big global event in the 2000. But the second and maybe even more important global event in 2000 took place in also 2001, and that was the decision by China to join the WTO, World Trade Organization. Now, maybe this is not the forum for me to explain about international trade, but in short, what happened is that even before 2001, China has been very active in producing a lot of manufacturing products imported by many countries around the world. I don't know, maybe some of you have heard the terms, the factory of the world. So China has been coined as the factory of the world. That was before they joined the WTO. What happened after they joined the WTO? It's even more extreme. All of a sudden, the growth of export of China to all over the world, including the biggest economy in the world, and that is the United States, increased dramatically. Again, students of economics, I'm assuming many of you were here, understand what happened if two countries are conducting international trade. One is exporting massively to the other. Of course, the answer is one suffers from deficit, current account deficit, the other suffers from current account surplus. That's exactly what happened. But why is this so important? Why is this new? Because if you look at the global economy, even 200 years ago, there were always countries suffer from deficit, countries suffer from surplus. So what's new about it? Here is what is new. And because this is new, the world entered the second G. Remember, I'm talking about 4G plus 1. So the first G is great moderation. Now we are entering the second G, and that is global imbalance. Why they call it global imbalance? Because as I said, since 100 years ago, there's always imbalance. There's always countries in surplus, countries in deficit. The answer is because for the first time in the history of the world, the size of the deficit coming from one country, just one country, has reached 70%. The deficit of one country contribute to the 70% of the entire global deficit. And of course, that country was the United States. And vice versa, the surplus in China reached unprecedented level. But actually, it's not only China who contributes to the global surplus. So if you look at the global surplus, let's say 100%, about 50% came from China and East Asian countries. Fortunately, Indonesia was one of them. So, when you have a global economy in which 70% of the total deficit originate in one country, that is something significant. Now, as that evolved, some, I will not say many, but some economists, and I'm one of them actually, started to raise concern. any system with imbalances, when the magnitude of the imbalance was so great like that, cannot be sustained. I mean, just, common sense. When you have a system in equilibrium in which the imbalances originate in one country already constitute 70%, something cannot be right here. But, as I said earlier, the world economy is doing fine. Everybody is happy. So who would like to be a party pooper? In fact, I remember I was considered as one of the party poopers because everybody is happy. Until 2007. In fact, it started in 2007. I know many economists, many people always coined the global financial crisis in 2008, but it all started in 2007, precisely in December 2007. Officially, the United States fell into recession. Now, why this was so important? Well, it was so important because many of the ingredients that led to the US recession originate in the global imbalance, which I indicated earlier. But again, at that time when people sort of, caution about the unsustainability of this global imbalance, they thought we are the party poopers. Until that recession happened. But something unusual also happened in the United States, beyond recession. And that is, what is the cause of the recession? And this is a very good education for economic students, The word recession can be defined. Many textbooks already define what is recession. But what led to that recession varied. And I think the event of 2007, 2008 was a very good experiment and good lesson for many students of economics. Something is unusual in the United States. Now, again, I don't know where to enter or where to start. Let me start with the promise of 3 US presidents, from Bill Clinton, George Bush, and the other George Bush. What they did as a president of the United States is to announce what they called achieving the American dream. Now, any president of any countries would love to say that, right? So what does it mean? What do they mean by achieving American dream? What they mean is, if possible, as many as possible Americans can have a house. Because I don't know if you know, many of the American people still do not have house. They're homeless. So naturally, being the president of the United States, they would love to increase the number of home ownership. And this was picked up by investors, by banks, mortgage companies. They became super active in lending to poor people who do not have a house. They lend, they lend, they lend. And in order to support the political message of achieving the American dream, the lending was without interest rate, zero. Zero interest rate. But underneath, very tiny letters said that after X years, they have to start to pay the interest rate. And of course, the interest rate was market rate. As you can imagine, millions of Americans who do not have a house, and I'm sorry to say mostly of them are the minority, the Black Americans, Mexican, and all the immigrants, they love this kind of credits with no interest rate. They took all of these credits. Everybody was happy, and the mortgage company who issue the credit for the poor, they create securitized financial asset. With that security, the mortgage company sell to investors. Why the investor wanted to buy this? Because this is a security of mortgage given to the poor people. Why are you buying this? And this is why. The market perception at that time said that the only direction of the house price, home price, is north. So the only direction is up. There's no way that the price of house will go down. So that was very attractive for investors. Everybody bought that. And for a while, everybody is having a party. The mortgage company have a party, the homeowners have a party, the investor also have a party. And all of a sudden, many big banks, and I'm talking about super big banks, big names that you've heard, including investment bank like Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, all kinds of big companies started to join the party. They also lend, they also buy all these mortgages, the securitized mortgages. Then came the time, remember that tiny letter at the bottom of the contract? They have to pay the interest rate. And of course, millions of them could not pay. Why? Because these are what they call ninja, people with no income, no job, no asset. You don't need to be rocket scientists to expect when the time comes, when the loan was due, they have to pay and they couldn't pay. As a result, the house of cards collapsed. From the homeowners, from the mortgage company, from the bank, for the large bank. And then, of course, the rest is history. By October 2008, there was one investment bank by the name of Lehman Brothers collapsed. And the repercussion of that collapse of the Lehman Brothers is not only confined within the US economy, but spread out in the global economy. And that's where we all enter into the third G, and that is Great Recession, officially started in October 2008. Can I have a water, please? Thank you. Thank you. So where we are? So we are in the third G, Great Recession, 2008. What is the impact on the rest of the world, including Indonesia? Well, interestingly, the significant impact of Great Recession was not the Great Recession itself, was not the event itself, but the policy response of the advanced economies towards the recession. And I'm talking about lowering the interest rate as low as possible. In fact, by that time, 5 countries in the world adopted, which I'm sorry to students of economics, you never studied this, because there is no textbook in economics talk about negative interest rates. 5 countries, Switzerland, Sweden, Denmark, ECB, and Japan. In the meantime, the other countries continue to maintain positive interest rate. So put yourself in the shoes of investors. You are facing a great confusion here, because usually the interest rate moves in the same direction, going up, tightening, or loosening, going down. But now investors are facing divergence. Some countries, and these are major countries like European, Japan, Switzerland, and so forth, major countries adopted negative interest rate, but other countries positive interest rate. And this is the period of the 4th G, Great Divergence. So we have 4 Gs now already, right? And of course, the most important policies that advanced economies took in response to the Great Recession that affect us, emerging market and Indonesia, is the QE policy, quantitative easing. Okay. I didn't have time to explain about it because it's highly technical. But the point here is that because of the QE, is that 10 minutes for me? Yes, all right, so I have only 10 minutes left. The point is that because of that QE, there's a massive capital inflows coming to emerging markets, including Indonesia. And in one of the charts that I show, there are 3 phases, basically. The first phase, can I show the phase here? Okay, here are the 3 phases. The first phase is basically capital inflows coming through banking sectors. So all of a sudden, if you look at the balance sheet of banks in emerging markets, blow it up. And many of these inflows became what they call non-core liabilities, because the core liabilities of bank usually is the deposits, right? Clients' deposit. But these are money from abroad, okay? And because of that, banks' capacity to lend also increased. That's why this is the period where emerging market, including Indonesia, experienced strong growth, steady growth, and everything. Everything positive. But like everything else, that something that is good is bound to be vulnerable. And the vulnerability came if the money that came in started to leave the country. But before I explain that, let's move to the phase 2, and that is the debt phase, the blue color. That's a phase 2. And that phase 2 came right after quantitative easing policy, QE. Long story short, what happened is that a lot of these capital inflows coming to emerging market did not go through the bank. Instead, they went to the capital market. So the protagonist in the first phase was banks. The protagonist of the second phase is fund managers, basically. All of a sudden, the capital markets in many emerging markets started to go up, to get strong. But again, something that is positive, that is the capital inflows, bounds to become capital outflows. And that happened in 2013. So 4 years after the QE, 2013, many emerging markets suffered from, by now, they call it taper tantrum. Many capitals left emerging markets. And that rattled the capital markets in emerging markets. Since then, until today, I would call phase 3, and that is the turbulent phase. A lot of uncertainties. And the story goes, many other unexpected events came. The war, the climate change, COVID, that led to the disruption in the supply chain. So, if you want to understand why we are now where we are, by looking at what I was sharing with you the last few minutes, you can see that things are very difficult because everything has a root. Unfortunately, many people just look at the contemporary period, oh, this is the current, we have to find the solutions. It's very difficult because every event has a root, and the root started from, which I explained earlier. This is what we call poly-crisis. You know the difference between multi-crisis and poly-crisis. We are now in a poly-crisis. In poly-crisis, it's not only multiple crises, but each of the crises are severe and each are affecting each other. One clear consequence of poly-crisis is the total is greater than the sum. This is the reasons why, if there is anybody can say with full confidence, this is going to be the outlook of the global economy, I don't buy it. Number one, the downside risk is there. Number two, The uncertainty is growing. This is what they call unknown unknown. Even the unknown, you don't know the unknown. So unknown unknown. Number 3, no single or easy solution. This is, honestly, I was listening to Sri Mulyani presentation. I admire what she's been doing. This is a super difficult period for policymakers to manage the economy under this current situation. So, having said that, because the UIIE asked me to say outlook, I have to say something about outlook, even though I don't trust myself what I'm going to say here. Okay? To make it balanced, let me start with the good news. And here are the good news. So far, there is no recession. That's good news. Secondly, China has emerged from the zero COVID policy. Because you know very well, during this zero COVID policy, China growth really went down. And now they came out from the zero policies. So that itself will contribute positively to the world economy. Number 3, gas prices has been declining. Now, this is very important for European countries, especially Germany, who relies so much on gas. But the price of gas has been declining, at least until 2 days ago, I checked. And last but not least, the price of oil went up to $84 per barrel. This is, I'm talking about Brent oil. And now it's already, last night I looked at the TV, 74. So it's already declining. Those are the good news. This is the bad news. Calm before the storm. It looks like everything is calm, but something is coming, is going to bite the storm. Early indication already popped up. The collapse of small bank, SVB. The collapse of second small bank, Signature Bank. The collapse of First Republic Bank. By the way, these are the real banks. Unlike Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, those are investment banks. But this is the real bank. Real bank means the banks that serve community, middle income groups, and so forth. They collapse, bank run. And the effect reverberates throughout the world. And then within 1 week after that event of March, one of the world's biggest banks, I'm talking about Credit Suisse, collapsed. And of course we know now it was taken over by USP. You know, when I was small, everything people talk about Switzerland, I remember 3 things: chocolate, watch, and bank. Now, the last one shattered that kind of perception. And I remember in 2008, remember the Lehman Brothers collapse? It took 6 months from the first bank collapse, that is the Bear Stearns, until Lehman Brothers collapse, 6 months. Here, the event that I was talking to you took only 10 days. SVB, Signature, First Republic, and then Credit Suisse. 10 days. Why? Technology. Again, for students of economics, I'm sure you who studied about banking, you learn something about bank run. Unfortunately, you have to learn something new now, because the bank run in the past is different than bank run now. The bank run now can happen instantly through social media. In fact, that's exactly what happened in the SVB. You know, 2 biggest depositors of SVB sent message through Instagram to their colleagues. Everybody pull out. As far as I remember, this is the first bank run in the world triggered by social media. because of technology. So what is all this message here? The message is exactly what Sri Mulyani mentioned. Things are very difficult, but we should not give up. You know, anything that is difficult, we need to try to solve it, no matter how successful or unsuccessful it is, but we have to try very hard. But trying hard is one thing, but understanding every single element of why that happened, it's super important. And this is where I see the role of you, the academics, because it's the academic people who need to understand every single element as well as the interrelation among those elements. With that, let me close, and once again, congratulations to UIIE for having the second international conference, and thank you again for inviting me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Prof. Iwan. Thank you. So many insights and also economic history lessons, and I believe there are so many questions, Prof. Iwan. But please allow us to turn into our second speaker, Professor Ishaq Bhatti. Before Prof. Bhatti presents his thoughts, let me briefly share his bio. Prof. Bhatti is Professor of Finance, Financial Data Analytics at SP Jain School of Global Management in Australia, and also adjunct Professor of Finance and Financial Econometrics and Data Analytics at Trobe University. He is also former Director of Graduate Research and Program Director at the same university. He is also a dedicated teacher. This can be seen from his teaching awards. He received Best Teaching Awards from Trobe University. He also received National Teaching Award from Australian Federal Minister of Education. Prof. Bhatti is also a prolific researcher that published more than 150 articles and 10 books. He is also a member of the editorial board of various reputable journals. So thank you for joining us, Prof. Bhatti. Please, the time is yours.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much. What an inspiring presentation by Professor Iwan Aziz. So after global imbalance of economy, my topic become very, very small and narrow. So Professor Iwan talked about global financial crisis, and the issue he discussed is how causality, forward causality is being linked with one event of financial crisis to another event, some good and bad news. But my topic is a bit narrow, trading among a small group, OIC countries. It's not a global, and the size of our economy is only the 9% of the global economy. 57 Islamic countries contribute very small the growth of the global economy, which is, I will try to put some light on it. A topic on my presentation is trading among OIC countries, overcoming some challenges and seizing opportunities. First of all, I would like to thank the Dean and the Rector of the University and Dr. Luthfi to invite me for this wonderful event. This is the fourth visit to Indonesia, and I'm very thankful to you for organizing a wonderful event. And the best part of the event is introducing me to a great scholar, Professor Iwan Aziz, whose presentation I learned great deals. Thank you. The contents of my presentation is I will introduce what I'm going to talk today, what challenges OIC countries are facing, and what opportunities we can grab out of these challenges to activate trade. My research methodology is a simple method using econometrics techniques, and I will use GM model here, though this research is in progress and initial results will be presented and we will discuss. feel free to give me some comments, Professor Iwan, Aziz, and other colleagues, and policies and conclusion at the end of my presentation. What a surprise! Rich in natural resources, with youngest talented population of Muslim Ummah. 60% of the population of Muslim Ummah is below the age of 30, which constitute a great human capital for the future. But yet, these 57 member countries are spanned in 3 continents, interconnected with the borders, okay? And their economies and stimulate their economies. The share of OIC member states in the world accounted only 9.22%. Why intra-trade relationships are so poor? This is the question we will try to explore. We will discuss today about the new insights of into trade development among OIC countries. This is a finding study using comprehensive model that incorporates social, culture, geographical, and economic factors. Total variable I consider is 12 variables taken from various existing studies and then update the literature. And this research is motivated by invited paper by one of our colleague, Ali Kutan, and who asked me to contribute a paper, Effect of Global Financial Crisis and Asian Financial Crisis and COVID on the performance of OIC banking, Islamic versus conventional. So I took all these 3 events into it, but unfortunately, if I have listened, I should have incorporated the GFC and Asian financial crisis as part of it. This paper provides valuable resources for academic researchers, policymakers who are interested in trade development among OIC countries, or trade bloc effects triggered economic development. So you can have a structure of starters, various starters, which can contribute to the trade development in OIC countries. Challenges faced by OIC countries are some important challenges include issues of trade openness. So I consider this variable as a part of my dependent variable. Access human capital. Indonesia is doing a very good job. Less than 5.5% is unemployment, but in other OIC countries, the unemployment is more than 20% as well. So I will consider this, though the list is very long, how many variables we can include. But I try to put some important variable, and list is summarized here. Limited trade, OIC trade, I found this is due to geopolitical reason. Superpowers interferences into these OIC countries. That is divide and rule policies, low economic integration and cooperation among them, diversification of economies among OIC countries that limit intra-trade between them and among them, political instability, wars, and conflict that is hindering the mutual trade among these countries. Inadequate trade relationship, infrastructure is not yet built, as Indonesia and other countries are trying to their best to build the infrastructure. So some of the African and South Asian countries don't have that infrastructure. Limited financial resources for trade-related initiatives. Tax debates are not available in some of the countries, and that discourage foreign direct investment in those countries. Especially for SMEs, there are lack of funding in the development of SMEs. COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions negatively impacted on intra-trade. These are some of the findings which I summarized before and challenges which I summarized before. But there are a lot of opportunities available in the development of trade among OIC countries. Number one is the growing younger population below the age of 30, approximately 60%. Look into Indonesian population, the fourth biggest populous country in the world, followed by Bangladesh, Pakistan, Chinese Muslims of Russian Republic, Asian Republic countries. Their population is growing very fast. And still unemployment and lack of direct foreign investment is abundant natural resources in several OIC member countries are causing some issues. Geographical proximity of some of OIC member countries, interest and investments from non-OIC countries in a trade with OIC member countries due to political instability, due to faith and religious effect and ethical. Opportunities for trade in services and technology base of industries do exist among those countries because some of the countries are complementing each other. Some are rich in resources, others are rich in human capital. Some countries are rich in agro-based industry. Other countries are based in oil, mine, and mineral industry. So these countries now complement with each other, but there is a lack of trust and intra-trade relationship. What research methodology have you used in this? This paper employs various models, including GMM, gravity model, OLS regressions using panel fix and random effect, and it estimates among various variables of interest, as discussed earlier. Out of 57 countries, I consider only 50 countries who are active in trade, who fulfill certain criteria. 9 years data is being used, starting from 2014 to 2022. It includes the COVID data as well. So we study pre-COVID activities of inter-trade relationship during COVID activities as well. And the sample includes countries from diverse 5 regions. I call it 5 blocks, 5 clusters. I did intra-cluster correlated effect as well. We call it equi-correlated effect, but that is not included in this paper. In this study, I used 2-stage GMM model. COVID dummy variables are included in the model to account for pandemic impact. This is my 2-step GMM model. Y is a dependent variable, and Z is my data matrix. Nu is usual disturbances term. The students who learn econometrics in their first semester, they understand some basics of the regressions. So I try to skip here because here you can see the only important thing to remember is expected value of new condition on I. Condition on I. Using expected value of new given I, where I is an instruments, and instruments are total instrument. In this area I use J. K is the number of parameters on explanatory variables, on independent variables. So the condition is imposed here that the instruments must be greater than the number of parameters we added. So that's why I say J is greater than or equal to K. To accomplish this, we can use G as a matrix, and we can work on that area. So to simplify that model for an economic and econometric students, you can see this is a YIT, gamma, lag of YIT, Z and epsilon, which follow usual I UIID distributed normally with zero mean and constant variances. My dependent variables are trade openness, TRAPO. Independent variables or explanatory variables are GDP, growth, FDI, direct foreign investment, inflation, real exchange rate, carbon emission, which is nowadays very popular, as discussed earlier, as a proxy of environment, population size, institutions, border sharing. The region which share the border, I use that border sharing as one of the variables. Export, two dummies are used in this model. One is the language, common language spoken. For example, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, they speak Malay language. Middle Eastern speak Arabic language. Indian subcontinent people speak Hindi or Urdu languages, whereas Central American people speak Russian languages. So I use language as one of the dummy variable as well to see the effect of common language on different regions, and then the COVID effect. So results and discussion. This research is work in progress, which considers the maximum variables in the regression model, which none of the previous studies have considered. Some consider 2 or 3 variables, but this is a comprehensive work which considers the maximum variable. Most of our results are in line with the existing studies and with economic theory. Slopes are in line with economic theory. And the trade blocks can foster economic growth among OIC member countries. Each trade blocks, 5 trade blocks I consider they can foster. Population size has a significant positive effect on bilateral trade flows. The trade liberalization process has a positive effect on the GDP per capita of each member countries on a long run. The size effect, which include the level of economic openness, inflation rates, exchange rates, plays significant role in determining bilateral export between some selected all countries. Not all, some selected. More efforts should be made to enhance inter-trade within OIC group. It is recommended a creation of trade and finance support schemes to be established all over OIC countries and within each regions. Reduce the US, also establishment of an OIC payment method for intra-trade transaction, issuing a trade-based special drawing rights that minimize the risk. Reduce the US dollar dependence and encourage trade among other countries. These are some of the summaries of the... Now, let me show you the results. So this is one of the regions. I selected Middle Eastern. You can see trade openness is highest, more than 0.8. GDP growth is 0.79. Foreign direct investment is positively, significantly contributing, whereas inflation is negatively contributing. So higher the inflation, the lower is the intra-trade. Also look, real rate, carbon, population is positive, and institution border sharing is the highest. So more border sharing, more intra-trade is taking place in the Middle Eastern countries. Export is also positively significant. Most of these variables are positively significant in developing the intra-trade relationship within Middle Eastern countries. So some of these coefficients are given in my paper. Paper will be available on the net after the conference. And some of these results, significance tests are given. And you can see most of these are very significant with the exception of population and institutions. And similar thing is for another, this is the Central Asian region. In the Central Asian region, you can see again, most of these variables are positively significant in contributing to the trade openness. Whereas inflation is playing a negative role here. So once we move to the next region, that is South and Southeast Asian region. Here again, you can see inflation is the major cause. Inflation is major cause which is reducing the intra-trade among these countries. However, you can see the COVID, due to COVID, we also have some negative effect on intra-trade due to transportation effects. And we can skip these results and go further to GMM for African region. In African region, you can see similar but bit poor results, though they are positively significant in contributing to the output. But inflation is the major cause in African countries as well. So major problem in African countries, which is -0.5, which is highest among all these regions. Now, when we consider the border sharing within African countries, it is the lowest. It seems the African countries, though they speak same languages, some of them, but due to political instability, political differences, and some problem, and you can see border sharing is only 0.43. It is the lowest. And export is highest. This language effect is also positive, but COVID is contributing negatively. To summarize all these results, I just prepared this diagram which can show the summary of all these. Trade openness is our dependent variable. Rest of the variables are independent variables. You can see foreign direct investment, inflation, and CO2, population, border sharing, export languages. So if you can look into European and South American countries, which is further away, but you can see they don't speak common language here. See, that effect is negatively lower, but you can see on the other side, CO2 and population has also the lowest among the European and South American countries, who are the members of. Middle Eastern countries are green. You can see that they are for a better situation. Central Asian are dark blue. They are a bit better. And South and Southeast Asian countries are, and this one, and African countries are the lowest. So the narrow the circle mean the worst performance. The wider the circle mean a better performance as overall in OIC countries intra-trade relationship. This can further be summarized in one of the tables. So what I did, I combined all these tables and took into these 4 regions and we summarize. The red indicate the higher level, yellow indicate the lower level of inter-trade for these various variables. It is interesting to read more when you are looking into the paper, full paper, you can understand very important and significant finding in this paper. Policies, we suggest 3 urgent policies to be implemented, and Indonesia being the most important member countries of OIC can take this as a leadership to provide some sort of implementation into, I call it 3P models. What they can do, promote the use of common language or provide language training. For example, most of the Muslims can speak Arabic or English as a common language. So common language will help because it is the most significant factor contributing to intra-trade relationship. So some sort of common language can be set up. Provide financial resources and support for SMEs. It should be a uniform policies through OIC, Islamic Development Bank, and other organizations to adopt unified OIC support policies to SMEs and invest infrastructure to improve accessibility and reduce the trade costs, intra-trade costs. Push regional trade integration by encourage cross-border cooperation and trade agreements and encourage economic growth and foreign direct investment. Instead of investing in other countries, OIC countries can invest among themselves. Conclusion, OIC is a significant global organization with diverse member countries. As I said, complementing the resources and human capital and expertise, they can grow more faster. Study, examine cultural, economic, social, linguistic, and contribute to the trade openness in the literature. GDP growth and foreign direct investment are essential economic variables for trade openness. Common language play a significant role in trade openness. Population and environment are also significant. COVID are non-significant. Geographical factors such as border sharing have a significant impact on trade in OIC member countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ishaq. Thank you. Professor Ishaq start with thought-provoking opening about OIC countries. They are rich in natural resources, huge young populations, but when it comes to the intra-trade among them, actually very poor, very low. And also, again, we have seen from his research about trade as a key to prosperity, to economic growth in the long term. And one thing that really struck me actually, even in bordering countries, they trade less because of this political instability. So I think this is really interesting research finding. So ladies and gentlemen, allow me to continue to our last but not least speaker, Dr. Fajar Hirawan. Let me read his bio. Dr. Hirawan is a lecturer at the Faculty of Economics and Business at UIII. He is also appointed as head of the Economics Department at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, in which he has joined for more than 15 years. His research mainly focuses on the issue of food security, international trade, digital economy, SMEs, and other strategic issues related with development economics. He is also very active in engaging public about economic policies through his writing in national newspapers and other media outlets. So please give applause to Dr. Hirawan, and time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah, a very good morning to all of you. Again, please allow me to, to ask a permission to Professor Aziz and also Professor Bhatti. I think I'm the only one who haven't yet professor, but I don't know. I'm not sure whether I would become the one in the futures. But anyway, Honorable Executive Board of the UIIU, Vice Chair Dr. Dadang, and also Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Professor Dian Mashita. So for today's presentations, I would like to, again, share the insight and perhaps could discuss you further regarding the frameworks to promote what's so-called as the inclusive and also the innovative economic growth. And perhaps, this is some things that you may agree or you may disagree. So it's some things that, that's why we are in the academic world. You may agree with me or you may also disagree with me. For today's presentation, I will divide my presentation into 5 parts. Perhaps, I would like to share a bit about the world megatrends and also disruptions, and perhaps, Professor Aziz already shared, and even Minister Sri Mulyani also already shared some things on the disruptions that are happening in the global world. The second part, I would like to share some things about the policy considerations and the development priorities that probably have to be prioritized in the context of Muslim countries, and perhaps, it could be one of the issues that we have to strengthen in the future. And then number 3, of course, I would like to share what's going on nowadays in the current global inclusive and innovative developments. And perhaps, I would also like to share the frameworks, the major framework in order to promote what's called as the inclusive and the innovative economic growth, and also the way forward. For the world megatrends and the disruption, probably most of you already aware that nowadays we live in several circumstances, the demographic change. We know that in the European continent, I think they are tend to be, entering the phase of the aging population. Meanwhile, I think, Indonesia and probably several Muslim countries having have a benefit that have a, more productive age populations. And perhaps, the things that I would like to focus more on basically is about the rise of the technology. And perhaps the other things that already have been delivered by Professor Aziz and also Professor Bhatti, I think, what's going on in the trading activity and also the international finance integrations, and perhaps, what's going on in the geopolitics and also the shift in the global economic powers. When we are talking about these technology advancement or technology disruptions, perhaps it could become a force, for the innovation and the creativity. Perhaps if you are the fan of movie Star Wars, usually may the force always be with you, and perhaps this technology advancement always become a force with all of us, when we are doing any activities, especially when we are talking about the economic activities. In the context of the trends of the international economic environments, I would like, to share a bit, even though I think Professor Aziz already shared something on the geopolitics and also the geoeconomics issues, especially the issues of the US-China tension. Perhaps, why we always see there's a rivalry between those two countries instead of cooperations, so perhaps, we could also promote what's so-called as a strategic cooperation instead of the strategic competitions. And also, I think Professor Aziz also mentioned about the increasing financial risk, the issues of the SVB, the Credit Suisse and other, financial sector issues. It seems that, when we are talking about the international economic environments, we are dealing with at least these three main issues: the disruptive technologies, the demographic changes, and also the environmental and social governance. And perhaps this is the things that perhaps we have to focus on in the future. When we are talking about this, in the context of the global governance and the cooperations, perhaps, there are four components that might be, you might be aware when you are dealing with this, what's so-called as the global governance and the cooperation. Perhaps, in the post-pandemic recovery, most of the countries now tend to be inward-looking, including Indonesia. I think, we thought that we could become a global, we are trying to focus on, I thought that Indonesia, because of the, because of our role as the presidency of the G20 last year, and perhaps, as a chairman of ASEAN this year, we could be more outward-looking instead of the inward-looking. But I think, because of the post-pandemic recovery events, perhaps, most of the countries now trying to fulfill the needs of the domestic needs that coming from their resources. And perhaps the increasing tension between the China and the United States also still going on. It's not only about the trade war and the trade policy. I think we know that US-China also dealing with the issues of the technology race, like the Huawei and also others firms coming from US that trying to install what's so-called as the subsea cable, for example, trying to give influence in the regions. And perhaps the trust and the mechanism also become the two main components that we are dealing with when we are talking about this global governance and the cooperations. I might jump to, the second part of my presentation. Basically, if we are talking about what should we consider in policymaking process, I think, most countries well, including Indonesia and also other Muslim countries that become members of the OIC member countries, I think, like there are three main issues that, have to be focused on by the countries. Of course, number one, we know that now we are dealing with the structural transformations. We know that, now the services sectors tend to have a biggest contributions to the economy. And perhaps, now all the sectors tend to be more capital intensive instead of the labor intensive. About the population structures, like I mentioned to you in the beginnings, that I think, some of countries now dealing with the, the productive age populations, but they are still struggling, in order to, let's say, to promote or to transform from the unskilled workers to the skilled workers. And I think it's not only the issues of the emerging economies, but also, I think, for the OIC member countries, including Indonesia, I think this is the things that we also have to focus on. And then the last things that might be relevant, I think it's about the digitalizations. Perhaps, digital infrastructures and also the digital literacy is a very necessary things that we have to focus on, especially in the, in the era of disruptive technology that happenings nowadays. And perhaps, with those three considerations, perhaps, all the countries trying to focus on how to boost their economic growth and also to realize what's so-called as the social welfare. Of course, it's not only about the, the quantity, but also I think it's about the quality. So that's why I'm trying to share my insight on how to promote this inclusive, innovative, and perhaps sustainable economic growth. And then when we are talking about the priorities, perhaps, I list at least three development priorities that might be relevant to be, concerned by the Muslim world's countries. Perhaps the reindustrialization, especially the Muslim countries in ASEAN continents. I think most of them are, well, I can say have a big potential in promoting the manufacturing industry. And I believe that the Muslim countries in the ASEAN continent, I think have a, a big contributor in order to promote this manufacturing industry, and it could be a basis of the manufacturing industry. But again, the issues that always facing by the countries, well, again, like I mentioned to you before, that, mostly, we are dealing with the new technology. It's mean that it's more capital intensive instead of the labor intensive. So that's why, promoting skilled worker is very important. And then perhaps the countries could create not only the low-tech products, but of course the high-tech products. Number two, I think the connectivity. I think, when we are talking about the connectivity, it's not only about the infrastructure per se, but also, how efficient is the logistic and the transportation services in the country or in the region. And perhaps, the last priority that I would like to share with you is about the innovations. And I believe that it is very relevant when we are talking about the knowledge and skills, and also about the technology disruptions that are happening nowadays. So what's happening now, when we are talking about the current global inclusive and the innovative developments, perhaps, when we are trying to assess or to evaluate the key performance indicators, so of course, we are not only talking about how to promote the GDP, how to increase the GDP, but also, I think, trying to focus on the equality. Perhaps, some of the students here also tend to focus on how to have how to promote the gender equality in the economic developments. And it's not only about how productive your labor in the countries, but of course, we are trying to focus also at how to have a equality or equal performance or equal treatment between let's say, the female laborers and also the male laborers. And I believe that, from most of the international organization, they always trying to focus not only about the quantity of the economic growth, but also the quality that focus on the inclusions, like the equality, and also trying to focus on the environment as well. So that's why now you may hear frequently about how to promote the inclusive, the innovative, and the sustainable economic growth. It's quite interesting, even though I couldn't find the latest index, and I don't know, probably it's the World Economic Forum discontinue their findings on the Inclusive Development Index, but based on the Inclusive Development Index 2018, well, of course, among advanced economies, there is no single Muslim countries there. But among the emerging economies, well, at least we could find one OIC member countries, like Azerbaijan, like as among top 10 most inclusive countries in emerging economies. But I think, like it doesn't mean that I'm sharing this table, it doesn't mean that it is impossible for Muslim worlds or, for the OIC member countries to promote inclusivity. But I think, like I can say it takes time. So that's why I'm trying to share some frameworks on how to, to accelerate the way or how to accelerate the economy towards this inclusive or the innovative economic growth. Based on the Global Innovation Index 2022, even, among the top 30 most innovative countries in the world, I also couldn't find Muslim countries there. Well, there's like a Uni Arab Emirates in the 31st rank, in the ranking 31 or 31st there, but I'm sorry, I just crop it, but I just focus on the top 30 most innovative countries in the world. And even, like Indonesia is also, well, I can say one of the biggest Muslim population countries, ranked 75th in the Global Innovation Index. So I think this is like a homework for the Muslim world and homework for the OIC member countries. And even, like Professor Bhatti also trying to promote how to increase the trade between the OIC member countries, right, Professor Bhatti? So I think, of course, this is also a big homework for the Muslim countries. So if we classify it by regions and also by income groups, well, of course, in the Northern Africa and the Western Asia, we can see the United Arab Emirates and Turkey as the most innovative countries in the region, in the Northern African and Western Asian regions. And even in the Central and Southern Asia region, there's like Iran and also Uzbekistan there. But based on the income groups, we also have well, it's good that we have Malaysia's there and Iran in the upper middle income and also the lower middle income classification as the top 3 innovation economies. But again, we hope that there will be a lot of or many Muslim countries that might be, it could be more innovative in the futures. Talking about the R&D activities, well, because I heard that, Minister Sri Mulyani also mentions that the R&D activities is very important. Even though, when we are talking about the R&D activities in some ASEAN countries, for example, Indonesia, the R&D expenditure to GDP, Indonesia is still very low. I think still very low, is under 1%. Even though we now have a BRIN, the innovative and the research institute, like a national institution, perhaps, it also could, boost this value or this percentage points, but among the other countries in the regions or in some ASEAN countries, we can see that Indonesia is way behind, other countries, especially when we are talking in the region. I think we are still very far from 2%, like what happened in Singapore, and also when we are trying to copy what's going on in South Korea, I think, like we also have to, have an extra effort in order to increase these figures or these numbers. It's quite interesting as well when I'm trying to see what's happening when we are talking about the World Economic Forum Readiness Index in the digital economy. Indonesia, as the biggest Muslim countries, well, I can say that, we are still in the nascent period in terms of the readiness, but it is a 2018 figure, and perhaps now we are getting better, perhaps, in the high potential quadrant or perhaps in the leading quadrant. But this is the things that, what happened in 2018, even you can see that Indonesia still in the nascent characteristics compared to what happens in the, in Malaysia, that already become a leading countries in the readiness digital readiness index. So talking about the frameworks, for me, there are some problems or there are some issues that have to be solved. I think number one is about the substance and the awareness. Perhaps, we should have a good substance, at least a good reasoning why this inclusive or innovative economic growth is very important. Like the definitions, perhaps, people should have the same understanding, about this inclusive and the innovative growth. So that's why, because of the lack substance and the lack awareness, there will be like a lack of capacity that coming from the government itself and also coming from the society. Number two, I think it's very important to have a clear political directions in order to promote what's called as the inclusive and the innovative growth. The consistency, and perhaps the government could do mainstreaming the agenda of the inclusive or the inclusive and the innovative economic growth. I think it's very important. And perhaps, it's not only the leader, it's herself or himself, that have to promote this. It's it should be like a collaborations among the policymakers and among the stakeholders. And then the last issues, I think, is about the coordinations. And I believe that because of there is no concrete mechanism among stakeholders, and sometimes there will be an overlapping roles among the policymakers, this is the reason why, the inclusive growth or the innovative economic growth still become homework for some countries, especially the Muslim world countries. So the key framework for me, I think we have to strengthen from the regulatory point of view and also from the institutional point of view. So that's why we could have a good ecosystem in order to promote this inclusive and the innovative economic growth. And if I may to share some things on how to make a good regulation, perhaps, for those who join my development economics class, probably you've seen this. Perhaps there's five things that might be relevant if you want to make a good regulation. Of course, number one is about necessity. Number two is a transparency. Number three is a proportionality. Number four is effectiveness and also the flexibility. So in order to conclude, and perhaps, I only have a couple minutes to conclude my presentation. Perhaps, the keyword in order to accelerate this inclusive or the innovative economic growth, perhaps we need more cooperations. I mentioned in the beginning that, usually when we are talking about the global economic powers, especially the US, China, they tend to have a strategic competition instead of the strategic cooperations, right? So I think this is the things that probably very relevant, and perhaps the cooperation, it could be, it should focus on several things. Of course, number one, the cooperations in the digital infrastructures developments. Perhaps, it's not only between or among the OIC member countries, and perhaps it's beyond the OIC member countries, in terms of the cooperation. Number two, I think we also have to learn how to have a proper digital governance, when we are dealing with the issues of the cross-border data flow, cross-border, even cross-border payment, and so on and so forth, even when we are dealing with the intellectual property rights. Cooperation in the digital economy, I believe that now you guys are very familiar with this digital economy things, even the e-commerce, especially during the pandemic era, you know, like you guys being locked down, and then you guys prefer to, you know, like do shoppings online. And number 4, last but not least, this is very important things that have to be covered as well. It's about the human capacity building. And perhaps, you know, like Aziz mentioned earlier, you know, like it's not only the issues among these OIC member countries or the Muslim world countries. So that's why I think we should have beyond the cooperations beyond Muslim world countries, and perhaps, you know, like it could have a good arrangements between these Muslim world countries and also the advanced economies that could promote this inclusive and the innovative economic growth. I will stop there and thank you, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi. Thank you, Dr. Hirawan. Thank you. So, I think we are so interested with discussion even when we had an earthquake, if I'm not mistaken, just few minutes before we didn't move from our seat. So, yeah, we are about to enter a Q&A session, but before we go into the session, let me summarize a little bit about what we discussed in this panel. So, from Prof. Aziz, we learned about what he said as 4G plus 1, about the great moderation, great imbalance, great recession, and then we end up with great divergence. And another important issue about geopolitical fragmentation. And I think these are very interesting economic history lesson, and also we see how our world has changed. And from Professor Ishaq Bhatti, we keep reminded that trade is one of the key to prosperity. So that's why we have to keep our trade open and push particularly into the Islamic countries group. And last but not least, from Dr. Hirawan, we learn about one important issue when we think about when we live in very volatile world, protecting the very vulnerable group or population is critical and important. And that's why we have to propose or to promote what we call as the inclusive growth and also innovation. Now, before I give questions to the floor, let me use my privilege as a moderator to dig deeper about what our excellent speakers presented here. Perhaps I would like to start from Prof. Aziz, if I may. Prof. Aziz, you mentioned about the volatility and also the changes of our economic realities. And if we observe in recent years, I think the business cycle is now getting shorter and shorter. So for instance, if we flash back a little bit into, let's say, 3 to 4 decades, business cycle typically, let's say, to 10 years. And now we just emerged, we just ended with the COVID-19, but now there is another crisis, banking crisis in the US, and we haven't seen how this will end. So my question is whether this short business cycle will be our new economic realities. I mean, like, we are going to live with these new realities, or is there any, for instance, like, as Professor Ishaq mentions, and also Pak Hirawan mentions about the policy coordination that perhaps, we can escape from this cycle. Prof. Aziz, please.
Thank you for the question. For the benefit of majority of the students here also, in economics, as he asked the questions about business cycle, there are 2 types of cycle. One is what he said, business cycle, and essentially it is the cycle of the real economy. So whether you measure it from output or from GDP or whatever, that's the common notion about the business cycle. But there is a second cycle, and that is called the financial cycle. So to make long short, when the business cycle is not compatible with the financial cycle, that's where you have a crisis. And if you look at the historical pattern in the past of all the crises, it's always featured by the fact that the business cycle is not in line with the financial cycle. Because, you know, I don't know you, but when I studied economics, that was long time ago, I remember my teacher told me that in any economy, there should be financial sector. You cannot have a real economic growth if there is no finance. And of course, we are talking about banking, lending to the business people and so forth, right? But over time, as my presentation indicated earlier, all of a sudden, the financial sector become its own king. Now, everybody is trying to move to the financial sector without producing anything. So this is the one clear example where the financial cycle goes by itself, not in line with the real sector, with the business cycle. Now, let me take this opportunity also, since we are in UIII. This is, to me, the strength of the Islamic economy. Because we know in Islamic economy, you cannot lend without any underlying physical asset, right? So essentially, it's basically telling the public that if you want to have a cycle in your economy, you have to make sure that the business cycle and the financial cycle is in line, okay? So to answer to your question, unfortunately, as we are speaking now, too many events occurred where financial cycle is not in line with the business cycle. You know, you can get super rich by not producing anything, just investing in the financial sector, okay? So the financial sector becomes its own king now. And this is what is sad to me, because again, I couldn't afford not to think about, when I studied economics, I thought financial sector supposed to be there to support the real sector economy. But now they're going by itself. In fact, if you look at the trend, the global trend, just plot the size of the GDP, the global GDP, it's going like this. And plot the size of the financial asset, boom, like that. I mean, you don't need to be rocket scientists to expect, if you have that kind of situation, bounds to be a crisis. So my answer to your question is basically, it's very likely that this coming year, this is what my slide about the calm before storm. I'm afraid it's going to be a storm. I don't know when, and I don't know where, because if I do, I'm not sitting here, I will become billionaires. But I think that's going to happen, given all this kind of event, which summarized by the fact that the financial sector go by itself, unrelated to the real sector.
Thank you, Prof. Aziz, for very interesting insights and also for a heads up. So we should be prepared about the future volatility. Now allow me to move to Professor Ishaq. You mentioned, you opened with really thought-provoking about Muslim countries, and we know that if we compare Muslim countries with general, other countries, in general, Muslim countries pretty much are lag behind. And one area that you do research is about trade that can be key to prosperity. And if we look at, the policy, particularly trade policy in, let's say, OIC group, the policies tend to be protectionist. So, and also OIC group, as a group, also come with different political systems, different interests. How can we address these challenges, perhaps from the area of the trade, promoting, like more cooperations? You already mentioned about, stronger cooperation among OIC group, within OIC group, but perhaps with different political systems, different policies related with trade, how can we push further about this area? Please, Professor Ishaq.
Thank you for this very interesting question. As my research suggests that having a common language and border sharing, so you can start with the closest country and who share border with you, so you can stimulate some of the FDIs and stimulate some trade. But for other countries, you can build a slow relationship, and then one group can be more effective with another group. So the group of countries who are border sharing, their trade can be more significant and interconnected as compared to non-border sharing countries. So once the border sharing countries take off their intertrade and increase and enhance their intertrade relationship, then of course the non-border sharing will be jump on it to get the fruit of their benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ishaq. Let me jump into another important issue about this innovative and economic growth, inclusive economic growth, and also this is related with Pak Hirawan mentioned. And if we observe in recent weeks, in recent months, we are shocked with, how artificial intelligence, the explosion of artificial intelligence transform our daily life, and even some predict that it might transform our economy. So how do you view these, these rapid changes with artificial intelligence, this digital technology to our economy?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Yudo. I think, I really anticipate that questions that coming from your side, perhaps, in the current technological development or advancement of technology, including the AI, perhaps, we cannot really, we have to adapt, we have to adopt the current, developments, especially in the, in almost all sectors in the economy. And perhaps, some of you probably think that it might substitute the role of the laborers, because of the AI, and perhaps, the current issues on ChatGPT, even they are trying to, kill some of the professional or occupations, including the lecturers might be, in the futures. But I think, this is the things that we need a good frameworks, in order to promote this inclusive or the innovative economic growth. I mentioned earlier that, every country should have a, a good policy or good political directions in order to, face these massive changes in the economy, especially when we are talking about the role AI. I know that some countries, trying to be, they're trying to adjust their sectors by having more and more what's so-called as a sandboxes policy, to test the business model whether it can survive or not. But I can say that, the policy or the political direction is very important, and perhaps, the main message that I shared in the beginning also, since most of the Muslim world countries, I think, dealing with this productive age population, I think we have to promote their skills, so if we having the current or the existing skills, I think we also cannot survive with this current technological developments. So that's my response, Dr. Yudo.
Thank you, Dr. Hirawan, for sharing your thoughts regarding this artificial intelligence development in recent weeks. So let me open up to 3 questions because we don't have much time. Please, Pak, please you. Yes, and then one Olga, and you, Pak. Oh, Pak Dadang, please, Pak Dadang.
Hello. Thank you very much for very insightful presentations. I think the silver lines from your presentations is one missing element. It's about ethics and morality. So when we talk about rivalry rather than competitions, so we can see from the global stage, it's very difficult to put everyone in line in one convergence policy internationally. So in this case, this divergence, having contagious to top level, now it's going very deep down into the very grassroots elements in the society. So from the policy point of view, how to, because time constant cycle is becoming, we cannot escape from. Digital technology development, it is something imminent that we have to engage. But at the same time, one element that has to be in control is about ethics and how people make decisions, because now decisions become very easily done by a very smart device. What do you respond to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Dadang. I think these questions, perhaps Prof. Aziz can respond.
This is beyond my pay grade, actually, when we talk about ethics. But you hit the key element of all the stories that three of us were talking about here. We can talk about policy, we can talk about framework, but at the end, it's really the decision made by human being. Policymakers are human beings too. And that's where ethical issue comes up. Cultural issues. I want to also highlight the role of cultural issue, because at this moment, I'm doing a research on very micro, not SME, not small, medium, but micro enterprises. I was struck and I learned a lot from my respondents who mostly live in the villages. They had different kind of a view in seeing things. And what I'm afraid is that policymakers had the good intention to make policy to improve their livelihood, but it's not compatible with their social capital. It's almost like the policymakers is working in FM radio signal, but their radio signal are AM, so it doesn't match. And I think this is one of the explanations, not the only one, but one of the explanations why there are so many policies did not work on the ground, did not work on the field where the policymakers rightly intended to improve their livelihood. So that's the only explanations I can give. But if you ask me how to solve this, I don't know. Maybe the only approach that I may advise is just listen. By the way, I'm writing the second book here because I just finished the first book. I'm writing the second book. I've been thinking very hard the last few months, actually. What will be the title of my second book? And I found one. The title will be Listen. Because policymakers are very smart, but maybe they need to listen more to the people whom they intend to help. Okay? And I learn, as I said, I learn a lot when going to these villages. I learn a lot from these people. In fact, if anything, they teach me. Just one extreme case. I went to Nusa Tenggara Timur. I don't know if you know, there is a suku, it's called suku Bhatti. If you look at the map of Indonesia, our stunting rate is high. It's higher than what WHO recommend, okay? And if you look at the map of Indonesia, where is the highest stunting rate? It's NTT, Nusa Tenggara Timur. So I went there. I want to understand what. Within NTT, the highest stunting rate is in Kabupaten. It's called Kabupaten Timur Tengah Selatan, okay? Because it's in Timor Islands and so on. And then within the Kabupaten Timur Tengah Selatan, I want to see where is the source of the stunting rate. And I was struck, there is one suku Bhatti in that kabupaten, the stunting rate is 0. Don't you want to learn why and how they live there? And that's why unfortunately, the king, because they have a king in Bhatti, okay? Bhatti king. Unfortunately, the king in Bhatti welcomed me, and I learned a lot from him, of course, through the interpreters, because he didn't speak Indonesian and so forth. So I learned a lot, and I'm going to put in my second book. This is the results of where I learned from them. And I don't think it's too much to ask for policymakers to do the same thing. Just listen to them. And I'm pretty sure all the good intention, all the good policy will work much more effectively by listening to these people. So I'm sorry I don't answer your question directly, because it's beyond my pay grade. When you're asking about ethical question, oh my goodness, I mean, that's beyond my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Aziz. It looks like an interesting book, and we love to hear. Prof. Bhatti, perhaps you'd like to add.
I just want to add, there is an index called Ethic and Sustainability Index by the United Nations. So it's already established. But the problem is on the ground, how they implement what Aziz said is harder to implement. But so people are talking about it, they're sensitive on that. And each and every organization is setting up their own ethics standard. Thank you.
Hi, Fajar, you want to add?
Sure, just a bit. Please allow me to respond to your questions, Dr. Dadang. I think, like when talking about ethics and morality, well, in my opinion, it's my perspective. For me, I think it's very difficult, or it's very challenging to assess those ethics and morality. And so that's why, the keyword that Professor Aziz mentioned, you have to listen. I think it's also very relevant, because when we are talking about, let's say, Prof. Aziz mentions about, what's happening in Timor Tengah Selatan or in TTS Regency. I think, there is like a lack of, well, I can say there's a lack of capacity. There's like a different capacity of the local government as well, so that's why, they think that they can do everything based on their perspective without listening, from others. So I think, it's very relevant, and thank you for reminding me, Professor Aziz, in that case. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hirawan. Let me go into the file for the second question. And please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is, I'm a PhD student here in UIII.
Sorry, introduce your name.
Tufail Hussain, in Economics and Business. Okay, my question is from Ishaq, Professor Ishaq Bhatti. Your paper is talking about trade openness and intra-trade between OIC members. So if I take one example, is Pakistan. So Pakistan is also a member of OIC. But if we see about the trade between the Muslim countries, so we share the border. You are talking about sharing border. So we share the border. Afghanistan also with Iran. But if we see, we have a very minimal trade between these countries. If we see, Iran is the biggest oil producer among the other oil producer, but we don't energy from Iran. If we see Afghanistan have a very good agricultural land, but we don't have any good relationship or not any good trade with these countries. So you also mentioned that there is political instability and religious extremism. This is the factor. That is, but do you? So there is also another factor, these kind of trades, which may be do you believe there is also another factor, which I must say there should be like developed countries influence, like United States, which influence the underdeveloped countries, which they not allow to trade with these countries. And also you talk about the currency dependency of US trade, US dollar. But you must aware of what happened in Pakistan. We also talk about we can trade with Russia. But you know that what is happening in Pakistan now. So how you see this?
Okay, thank you, Tufail. I think Tufail's questions is closely for Prof. Bhatti, but let me collect other questions, one more question, so we can respond together. The third question from Olga. Please introduce yourself and be short on your question because we don't have much time.
Cek, oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Prof. Iwan, Prof. Bhatti, and Pak Fajar for the opportunity, and Pak Yudo. So, my question is slightly bit long, but I will mention one by one for all of the speakers here. So, the first question for Prof. Iwan. Prof. Iwan, you mentioned about the American dreams, right? So, actually, the policymaker deal the problem in the country with a dream to the community. So my question is, what should policymaker do first? Because we have so many problems here, and how to make a good portion and combination with making dreams come true, or solve the problem first? That's my question, Prof. Iwan. Thank you.
Thank you. How many questions? Please, only one more questions, yeah, because we don't have much time. You only have one question, or?
Yep, just one question.
Oh, okay,
Thank
okay
you.
then. Okay, so perhaps I will give Prof. Bhatti first to respond to Fail's question, and then Prof. Iwan to respond the last question, please.
Thank you. I'm excited to see students are asking a wonderful question from Olga and Tufail. And Tufail is a PhD student, right? Yeah, okay. Olga, you are a master or PhD student? Master. MashaAllah, very good. Oh, let me answer Tufail's question. See, Iran got international embargo. Pakistan is a member of that group which put embargo, and Pakistan is a signatory. But Pakistan is also a brotherly country with Iran and Afghanistan, isn't it? So they share border. My research coefficient says it's 0.84 if they share the border, very high. See, there is a international embargo, still under international embargo, Iran, Pakistan border, trade is going on. You can call it illegal trade, but hidden from international embargo, there is a cheap oil coming from Iran to Pakistan in refineries. There are other items of agriculture products which are going from Pakistan to Iran through India. India is providing to Pakistan, and Pakistan sending back to Iran. And same thing is happening because border sharing is taking place between Afghanistan and Pakistan. 80% of the supply line is coming from Pakistan, no matter what. So you can see it's a significant contribution of border sharing, though they speak different language. If they speak different language, the border sharing and inter-trade between these countries will be very, very high. So I can say it can be, once embargo is taken off, there is you can see there is a pipeline proposal starting from all the way from Russia, Afghanistan, Pakistan to Iran and the rest of the countries. And there is also Chinese interest that the border sharing between Iran, Pakistan and Afghanistan, because they're setting up a train. And so that motivate, encourage and enhance the inter-trade relationship between these countries. Thank you. I hope I answer your question. Tufail.
Thank you, Prof. Bhatti. Perhaps Prof. Aziz.
Yeah, that is a good question. Rather than answering conceptually, let's go to the ground, okay? Let me give you an example. Again, I'm sorry if I share my personal experience, but this time in Gayo, in Aceh, okay? So I went to Kabupaten Bener Meriah. I don't know if you know, there is an actual kabupaten and the name is Bener Meriah. It's in Gayo, in Aceh. Okay? And the reason I went there is I want to interview farmers, coffee farmers, because Gayo is very well known of the coffee and so forth, right? So the local colleagues of mine already organized that. And it so happened I came there with my colleague, a professor from Cornell. He's an American. So two of us flew there. But when we landed there, unfortunately it was picked up by Bhatti. I started to feel uneasy because, this is not going to be the kind of conversation that I will have with the Petani Gayo if the Bupati was there. And then Bupati took us to a hall like this, and there are maybe 100 farmers, coffee farmers in the audience and so forth. And the setting is like this. It's no good. How can I have the conversation with these farmers and expect the farmers are brutally honest with me about all the problems that they're facing so that I can analyze and so forth? It's impossible. And then in 30 minutes later on, the governor of Aceh came. That's the end of the session. So I thought, forget about it. So I told my colleagues here, can you organize dinner, so later tonight, but just between us, in a restaurant or, sambil ngopi, sambil kongko-kongko ngopi begitu. And we did that. Now, the reason I'm giving this example is to answer to your question is that if you do not know what is behind the wall, go behind the wall. Very simple. That's my philosophy. We don't know so much about how these farmers are dealing with their 24 hours a day. And yet we pretend that we know. This is what I meant by FM signal. The smart people thinks that we know what are the problems of these people. We don't know. But we pretend to know, and then we came up with whatever policy measures here. It's very simple. You don't know what is behind the wall, go behind the wall. So that's, I guess, unfortunately, I'm just re-emphasizing what I said earlier. There's nothing new to your question, but that's a very deep question. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Prof. Iwan. Very interesting personal story about your travel to Gayo. Well, I would love to give more questions, but we already reached an end of our panel. So again, from today's panel, we learned a lot of economic history, lessons, insights, and also research findings from our excellent speakers. So please give our excellent speakers a big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. And allow me to return the stage into MC.
Thank you, Pak Yudo, for having chaired the first panel discussion. Please, to all the speakers and Pak Yudo, stay on the stage for the taking photo session. Please stay for a while. Now, we would like to invite Ibu Dian Mashita to present token of appreciation to all the speakers for this event. To Ibu Dian Mashita, please come to the stage. For media team and IT team, please help capture this moment. We start with Professor Aziz first. Okay. Okay, thank you. Professor Aziz, please stay. And next to Professor Bhatti. for the back also. Okay, great. Next, for Pak Fajar, please come forward. Okay, for the back. Okay. Wonderful. Now for all speakers, please stand up and then we take a photo session together with Ibu Dian and Pak Yudo. Yes, please, Pak Dadang, join the photo session. Pak Luthfi, Ibu Aima, would you like to join? Thank you. Please wait a moment. Big round applause, audience. Thank you, Ibu Dian. Thank you, Pak Yudo, and for all the speakers. Now you may go back to your seat. Again, our gratitude should go to all speakers for their brilliant discussion and expertise during the forum. We also appreciate all attendees for participating. It is time for break. Our committee does prepare lunch for all, so please help yourself. And we will continue the second panel session at 1:30 p.m. So please be here with us again. Before you leave this hall, we have some announcement. Okay, first announcement. For those who want to go Zuhur prayer, our mosque is next to the right this building, Rahmatan lil Alamin. Our team will show you the direction. And we also like to remind all participants, if you already received a coupon from the registration team before in the morning, you may now exchange your coupon with a goodie bag at the registration table. And for those who didn't get any coupon before, please check with our team just in case we miss something. Next, for those who want to access booklet, kindly scan the QR code provided in the registration table. And then don't forget to take the best shot in the photo booth and post it in your Instagram and mentioning our social media on the screen using hashtag ICMWEB 2023. Okay, don't forget to follow our Instagram. We have official Instagram UIII and official Instagram Faculty of Economics and Business. Okay, next, the last announcement. Since we mentioned in our brochure before, by joining our conference, you will get some benefit. One of the benefit is to have free access to our library resources for 2 months. So for you to get this privilege, please activate your library membership into this WhatsApp number. Please, you can write it down or you can save it. And then you can send also to our email, library.center@iiu.co.id. And during this break, you may go visit our library building to see what we have there, just in case you change your mind, what you can benefit from us by using our library facility for the next 2 months. And don't forget to come back here because we're going to continue the second panel discussion at 1:30 p.m. Thank you.